The old herbalist plucked a single strand of hair from the young woman's head, rolled it between two fingers, and dropped it into a clay bowl of black water. She said nothing. She simply watched the strand sink, then looked up with eyes that had gone suddenly cold. "You should not have come to me," she whispered. "Now none of us can stop what's coming." 3 nights later, the village of Umuoji woke to screaming. Not one voice, not 10. Every household, every hut, every soul within the compound walls, screaming at the exact same moment, as if something had reached into their sleep and pulled the nightmare into the waking world. This is the story of what one hair unlocked and why the elders still refuse to speak her name. Umuoji sat between 2 rivers in the kind of valley where mist clung to the palm trees until mid-morning. It was a farming village, modest in size, proud in tradition, and ruled quietly by a council of elders who trusted the old ways more than they trusted change. At the edge of the village, past the yam barns and the meeting square, lived Nnenna, a healer whose knowledge of roots and rituals had been passed down through 4 generations of women before her. People called her Mama Nnenna, though she was not old enough to be anyone's grandmother. Her power had simply aged her reputation faster than her body. A young woman named Chioma came to her one evening, breathless, her wrapper still dusty from the road. Chioma was newly married into a wealthy family from the neighboring town of Ihiala, a match her own parents had struggled for years to arrange. But since the wedding, misfortune had followed her like a shadow that refused to shrink at noon. Her husband's business collapsed within weeks. Her mother-in-law grew inexplicably ill, and Chioma herself began waking each night with the taste of ash in her mouth, though she had eaten nothing but fufu and soup. "Someone is working against me," Chioma said, gripping the healer's wrist. "I need you to find out who." Mama Nnenna studied her for a long moment before agreeing. She needed something of Chioma's body to see clearly into the spiritual threads surrounding her, and hair, she explained, held memory the way soil holds rain. She plucked a single strand, dropped it into the bowl, and that was when her expression changed. The black water did not simply darken, it curdled, the surface pulling into a slow spiral as though something beneath it had turned to look upward. Mama Nnenna leaned back from the bowl, her breath catching. In her decades of practice, she had read jealousy in the water. She had read grief, betrayal, even the quiet poison of a rival wife. But this was different. This was old. Older than Chioma's marriage. Older than the quarrel between the 2 towns. Older than anyone currently breathing in Umuoji. "This was not placed on you by a person," the healer finally said. "It was placed on your bloodline, long before you were born." Chioma did not understand, and Mama Nnenna herself needed 3 days to trace the thread properly, a process that required fasting, isolation, and a return to the shrine of her own late teacher for guidance. She warned Chioma to go home, to stay indoors after dusk, and to speak to no one of what had been done. Chioma obeyed the first instruction. She did not obey the second. By the following morning, half the village knew that the healer had uncovered something ancient stirring brief in Chioma's family name. Fear moves faster than fact in a small village, and within hours, the story had grown teeth of its own. Some said a curse, Some said a debt owed to the river spirits. Others, more dangerous in their certainty, said Chioma had brought something evil into Umuoji by marrying outside the town without proper rites. Mama Nnenna, deep in her fast, sensed none of this. She was elsewhere, walking backward through generations, searching for the moment the throat had first been tied. On the second night, the healer found it. 2 generations before Chioma, her great-grandmother had been a young bride herself, promised to a man from Umuoji against the wishes of another suitor, a hunter named Okonkwo, who had loved her since childhood. Heartbroken or humiliated before the entire village, Okonkwo had gone to a diviner of his own, one who practiced a darker concept than waking words color touched. He asked for a binding, not on the birth herself, but on every dokal born from closing from conversations, so that none of them would oversown peaceful mattered. The diviner warned him by a grief he could not carry any other way. The binding had slept for decades, dormant through daughters who never married, active only when a bloodline daughter took a husband under her own family's roof. Chioma was the first in 2 generations to do so. Mama Nnenna understood now why the water had recoiled. The binding was not simply cursing Chioma. It was waking, hungry, and reaching for anyone connected to the original wound, which meant Okonkwo's own descendants were now in danger too, along with anyone in the village who had witnessed or spoken of the humiliation that started it all. In a village as small as Umuoji, that was almost everyone whose grandparents remembered the old hunter's heartbreak. She rushed from the shrine before her fast was complete, a decision every elder healer knows carries its own risk. That night, the 3rd night since the single strand had touched the black water, Umuoji did not sleep quietly. It began in the compound nearest the old hunting grounds, where Okonkwo's descendants still lived. A woman woke, certain that someone stood at the foot of her bed, though the room was empty. Her scream woke her husband, who saw nothing, yet felt his chest tighten as if invisible hands had gripped it. Within minutes, the neighboring compound erupted the same way, then the next, spreading through Umuoji like fire finding dry thatch. Children who had never heard the old story of Okonkwo and the diviner suddenly spoke his name in their sleep, thrashing, calling out apologies for a wound they had never caused. By the time Mama Nnenna reached the village square, half of Umuoji stood outside their huts in the moonlight, too afraid to go back indoors, too confused to explain what had gripped them all at once. Chioma was among them, pale and shaking. Her mother-in-law collapsed beside her, breathing but unresponsive. The healer understood immediately. The binding had fully woken, and it was not searching for one woman anymore. It was collecting a debt from an entire village that had let heartbreak curdle into something monstrous decades ago and had simply moved on, as villages often do, without ever setting the old wrong right. There was only one way to close a binding rooted in a broken promise, Mama Nnenna told the gathered elders as dawn approached. The debt had to be acknowledged publicly by the family that caused the wound and the family that suffered it, together in the same breath. Pride, she warned, was the one thing the binding fed on most. As long as either side refused to name what happened honestly, the screaming would return each night, worse than before. It took convincing. Okonkwo's grandson, a proud farmer who had never wronged anyone himself, did not want to apologize for a decision made before he was born. Chioma's family did not want to admit that the marriage which had cost them so much had also carried an old wound they never knew existed. But fear, in the end, is a powerful teacher. Before the sun fully rose, both families stood in the village square, spoke the old story aloud without shame or blame, and released it into the open air where secrets lose their strength. The screaming did not return that night or any night after. Chioma's fortunes did not reverse overnight, but the ash taste left her mouth. Her mother-in-law woke and recovered within the week, and slowly the family's luck steadied itself the way a boat settles once the storm has actually passed, not merely paused. Mama Nnenna never took another hair from anyone without warning them fully of what the water might show, and the village of Umuoji, to this day, teaches its children one lesson above all others passed down from that season. A wound left unspoken does not disappear. It waits, patient and quiet, for someone to inherit it. If the story pulled you into Umuoji tonight, tell me in the comments which family you believe carried the heavier burden. The one who broke a heart, or the one who paid for it generations later. Subscribe for more village stories where the past never truly stays buried, and I'll see you in the next one.